Ladies and gentlemen, what you think you know about this scoreline is not the whole story. A straight sets victory, 2-0. On paper, it looks clean, almost routine. But paper doesn't tell you about the moment the entire match threatened to unravel. It doesn't tell you about a scoreboard that read 5-1 in the second set, with defending champion Leylah Fernandez suddenly looking like the player everyone remembered. And it doesn't tell you about the version of Alexandra Eala who, for one dangerous stretch, seemed to be losing her grip on a match she had built so brilliantly. Because this was not a comfortable win. This was a rescue mission. Alexandra Eala had already taken the first set 6-2. But instead of allowing the match to drift into a deciding third set, she found a way to pull herself back from the edge and complete one of the most revealing victories of her young career. This was not a comeback from losing the first set. This was a player refusing to let a match become a third set at all. And by the time it ended, Alexandra Eala had defeated defending champion Leylah Fernandez 6-2, 7-7, 6-1, turning a 5-1 deficit into one of the signature victories of her season.
Eala, first of all, congratulations, yet another win here in Washington for you. I have to ask, very tricky, windier conditions today comparative to yesterday. Can you explain how difficult that is, as well as your opponent was today?
It was definitely a factor, but ultimately something I couldn't control. I think I had definitely some tough moments in that match, and credits to Leylah. She put me in some really tough positions, so I think I'm super proud of how I fought and how I stayed in there.
Washington in late July is where the American hardcourt swing begins, the gateway to Toronto, to Cincinnati, to the U.S. Open itself. The Mubadala CDDC Open isn't a major, but for a player like Eala, it is exactly the kind of tournament where careers quietly reshape themselves after a successful grass court swing that lifted her to a career-high WTA ranking of no. 29, Filipina tennis sensation Alex Eala opened her hardcourt campaign at the 2026 Mubadala DC Open on July 27. 3 weeks earlier, in a moment that would define her season, she had done something no Filipino player in the Open era had ever done. Eala arrived having produced the biggest result of her career at Wimbledon, where she became the first player from the Philippines in the Open era to reach the fourth round of a Grand Slam, beating defending champion Iga Swiatek along the way. So there was weight on her shoulders walking into Washington. Not pressure in the negative sense, but expectation, the kind that follows a player once the tennis world starts to believe. And waiting for her in the second round was a name that carried its own complicated history. Leylah Fernandez, the 2021 USS Open finalist, was the defending champion of this very tournament. She arrived currently ranked number 34 with a career-high number 13, a player capable of flipping a match with raw shot-making and a competitive streak that has taken her to a Grand Slam final. And there was unfinished business here. The victory sent the 21-year-old Filipina into the quarterfinals and evened her head-to-head record with the 2021 U.S. Open finalist at 1 win apiece. Fernandez had won their lone previous meeting 6-1, 6-4 in the opening round of the Stuttgart Open in April. That defeat on clay had been lopsided. Eala had barely competed. This was the rematch nobody in Manila had forgotten, and everybody in that Fitzgerald Tennis Center crowd understood exactly what it meant. The first set told one story. Eala was crisp, decisive, and ruthless with her opportunities. The opening set was largely characterized by Fernandez's mistakes, 14 unforced errors in 8 games, to be exact. Every rally seemed to end on Eala's terms. A clean backhand down the line, a well-timed approach, a return that landed just inside the baseline and forced another miss. Eala got a break in the second game of the opening set and was in top flight immediately. It was the more accomplished Canadian who had to find her footing quickly or be swept off the court. The set closed out 6-2, and for a moment this looked like it might be a formality. Then the match turned inside out. Fernandez, to her enormous credit, stopped playing like a defending champion under siege and started playing like one defending a title. She found her range on the forehand, started dictating from the back of the court, and suddenly Eala's first strike tennis had nowhere to hide. The Filipinas' level dipped, and it dipped hard. The second set began on even footing, but Fernandez, currently ranked number 34 with a career-high number 13, found her rhythm and reeled off 5 straight games to move within a game of forcing a decider. From a breakup early, Eala found herself staring at a 1-5 deficit, the kind of hole that swallows careers on any given Tuesday afternoon. You could feel the momentum shift physically in the stadium. Fernandez's fist pumps got louder, her supporters, sensing blood, rose to their feet between points. Eala, by contrast, went quiet, not rattled exactly, but searching, the way a boxer searches for range after being caught clean. And then, almost as suddenly as it had disappeared, her level returned.
That spot, it was a little bit tougher for you in the second set. She was playing a lot more aggressive, down 5-1. What changed for you? What were you telling yourself to come back the way you did in the second set?
Yeah, I know that she was playing a little better, and maybe I had my level dropped a little bit, and I think those are very tricky moments when you know your level's dropped and you want to do better, but things just for one reason or another aren't coming out. And I think patience was key there, and just trying to work it out, and have a strong mentality in terms of trying to find solutions.
So talk about...
This is the part of the story that separates good wins from statement wins. Eala regained her composure, reminiscent of her round of 32 win over Zheng Qinwen, when she rallied from a set down and retook control of the match, later admitting, "I know that she was playing a little better, and maybe my level dropped a little bit." I think those are very tricky moments when you know your level has dropped and you want to do better, but things just, for one reason or another, aren't coming out. That honesty matters. It tells you this wasn't some mystical flip of a switch. It was a conscious, grinding process of stopping the bleeding point by point. Come the tiebreak, it was all Eala, going up 3-0 before her opponent saved her campaign 1-3. But the pride of the Philippines was too good to handle, finishing off the match with a beautiful winner, 7-1. Think about that number for a second. 7 points to 1 in a tiebreak against a Grand Slam finalist who had just won 5 straight games. That is not a fortune escape. That is a mental hammer blow. Strip away the highlight reel and the numbers explain exactly how this match was won and nearly lost. Eala's first serve percentage hovered around the 63% mark for the match, a number that looks unremarkable in isolation but tells a real story when you consider where it dipped. During her dominant stretches, her first ball was landing deep and with purpose, taking time away from a Fernandez backhand that thrived on rhythm. During the 5-game collapse, that same shot lost conviction. Shorter, more central, feeding exactly the pace Fernandez wanted. The breakpoint conversion numbers are perhaps the most revealing thread of all. Converting 4 of 9 break chances is not a clean, clinical figure. It's the number of a player who kept creating opportunities even when she wasn't capitalizing on all of them, and crucially, kept creating them again in the moments that mattered most, the tie break included. Missed break points can crush a lesser competitor's confidence. Instead, Eala kept manufacturing them, trusting that eventually the door would open.
About that a little bit. We saw you go over to your coach after you won the match, and a lot of players don't do that because they're so used to sort of being out here on tour, but you have such a good relationship. Can you talk through how important that is to have a great coach-player relationship?
I mean, it's super important. Joanne, who's here with me, is my confidant. You know, I trust in him a lot, and as well as my team who's back home, Yuke and Sandro. Sandro's birthday was yesterday, so shout out Sandro. I don't know if he's watching, but yeah, I think it helps me feel like I'm not alone on court. Yeah.
Then there's the unforced error column, and here the gap becomes almost jarring. The biggest difference to highlight Eala's smooth play was the unforced errors count, where she only committed 4 to the 14 of Fernandez. Across an entire match, that gap tells you who was dictating and who was chasing. Winners matter, aces matter, but discipline, the refusal to give away free points, is often the real separator at this level, and it was the backbone of Eala's victory even during the shakiest 10 minutes of the match. Tactically, this was a lesson in patient construction rather than pure firepower. The match featured 2 players who can hit ground strokes well but need precision to win, and Eala, at her best, has more room for error because of her strong backhand than the Canadian. That backhand became the engine of the entire performance, a shot she could use both to absorb Fernandez's pace and to redirect it down the line when the Canadian tried to load up cross-court. The return positioning told its own story. Eala stood noticeably closer to the baseline against Fernandez's second serve, a decision that paid dividends early and cost her briefly during the mid-match wobble when Fernandez started serving with more conviction into the body. When Eala regrouped, she didn't abandon that aggression. She recalibrated it, choosing her moments rather than living on the edge point after point. That's a mental adjustment as much as a technical one. Rather than retreating into safety, she trusted the same identity that had won her the first set, just with sharper shot selection. Movement was the other quiet hero of this comeback. Fernandez's flurry of games came largely from taking time away from Eala, rushing her into defensive positions. The turnaround began the moment Eala started resetting the point from behind the baseline instead of trying to end rallies early from neutral positions, buying half a second, absorbing pace, and waiting for the ball that let her transition forward on her terms rather than Fernandez's. Every big win has a moment that decides it, and this one had at least two. The first was surviving that 1-5 crater without letting the set slip away entirely, clawing back enough to make the tiebreak inevitable rather than academic. The second and the more telling one was that tiebreak itself. Going up 3-0, watching Fernandez claw back to 3-1, and then closing it out 7-1 without a hint of hesitation. Champions don't just create big leads. They protect them when an opponent starts believing again. That's the difference between nerves and composure, and on Wednesday night in Washington, Eala had the latter when it mattered. For all the resume-building brilliance on display, there is a pattern worth naming, honestly. Eala still occasionally loses her grip on matches she is dominating, allowing opponents back into contention through a dip in serve consistency rather than opponent brilliance alone. The mid-match collapse against Fernandez wasn't an aberration. It echoes stretches we've seen before this season, where a comfortable lead evaporates before she reasserts control. It didn't cost her this time. Against a higher-ranked, sharper closer, it eventually will, unless she tightens that in-match consistency. For the second tournament in a row, Alexandra Eala has dethroned a tournament's defending champion 4 weeks after upsetting Iga Swiatek in the Wimbledon third round. She took out 7-seed Leylah Fernandez in the Mubadala DC Open second round, overturning a 5-1 deficit in the second set. And on her preferred hard courts, her game proved more potent as she took advantage of an inconsistent performance from last year's winner. That sentence alone should stop the tour in its tracks. This isn't a one-off run of form. This is a pattern. Eala will next face either 2-seed Alina Svitolina or Uzbek qualifier Polina Kudermetova in the quarterfinals. Both paths carry very different dangers. Against Svitolina, Eala already holds recent proof of concept. The two have met once, with Eala leading 1-0 after prevailing on grass at Berlin in June 2026, 6-3, 6-4. Though Svitolina brings vastly more hard-court pedigree and had won 10 straight matches heading into Washington. Against Kudermetova, the history is far less favorable. Kudermetova holds a 2-0 head-to-head advantage, their last meeting coming in December 2024, a 4-6, 6-2 defeat for Eala, but that was a different Eala, ranked outside the top 100 at the time. Whichever name lands across the net, the blueprint is already visible. Serve with more conviction in the moments where her level tends to dip. Keep the backhand as the aggressive weapon rather than the safety net, and close leads before they become vulnerabilities. This was not just another win. This was not just another comeback. This was the moment belief became reality. Champions are not created when everything is easy. They are revealed when everything is against them. Down 1-5, staring at a Grand Slam finalist finding her best tennis with the crowd turning and the momentum gone. If this performance is any indication, the rest of the WTA Tour should be paying attention. This is not the end. This is only the beginning.